Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
and today is episode 199 of Podcast 2 for 1, youtube.com/2 for 1 studios. It's the best place to consume all the content. And guys, if you didn't know, let's be honest, listeners, you probably not. We are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. They have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year.
Kapow.
Kapow. And if you doubly didn't know, we are joined by none other than Dr. Bruce Hutchinson. Doctor?
I'm so happy to be back. Again, I have to count and see how many episodes this is. And of course, there's also the missing episode. So, do we count that or not? I don't know.
Yes,
there is.
It died so Donovan's thesis could live. That's what happened with that one.
You know, if you still have that drive and you put the right software on it, I bet you could recover that file.
Yeah, who knows? All I know is that The Dark Knight Rises is Bruce's favorite Chris Nolan Batman movie. That's all I know. That's all I remember, honestly. That's all I remember from that movie.
Yeah.
But we are talking at least I didn't know this until about 10 minutes ago, but I have a hunch that'll be correct. For me, Alien is a huge franchise for me. I remember sitting on my computer back in that late 90s and just absorbing everything I possibly can about this franchise. At that time, Alien Resurrection had just come out a year or two prior. And I remember like foaming at the mouth for this it was called the Quadrilogy Alien box set on DVD. And
I got that too. Yeah.
Did you? I was obsessed as a kid. You're like 10 years old. You're like, how do I get this? So anyway, it's huge for me, that and Predator. And I'm so thrilled to be talking about Ridley Scott's Alien today with you, Bruce, and you, Daniel, and especially you, Daniel, because Daniel, everyone, has never seen any Alien movie ever.
That's true.
Until now.
No, actually, guys, I forgot to watch the movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch it while y'all talk about it. I'm just going to have it
perfect
over here. Yeah.
For the next one, we should do one of those live reaction videos.
I'd be down for
where Daniel watches the movie and see it.
That'd be fun.
I'd be down.
Yeah.
I'd be down. I love it. Anyway, I am excited to talk about this. Bruce, give me your initial thoughts on the Alien franchise and if you like it or not.
I love the Alien franchise. I love Alien. I love Aliens. I was too young to see Alien in the theater. I saw Aliens in the theater. In fact, it was my friend's 17th birthday, but I hadn't turned 17 yet, and his dad bought us tickets, and I snuck in to see it. It was the first or second R-rated movie that, if I remember correctly, that I went to before I was 17. So that was incredibly great experience and very formative in my high school years. I love, the original Quadrilogy. I love all of those movies, by the way. Like, some people don't, rate the third and fourth ones. I think they're all great. I think they're fantastic. But of course, there's no denying that when you have the first one directed by Ridley Scott, second one directed by James Cameron, that you're in pretty rarefied territory with those two guys. So yeah, I love it. I used to teach Alien in screenwriting classes. I don't anymore, not because there's anything wrong with it, just because I like to keep movies slightly contemporary, and Alien's now 45 years old, something like 45 years this year. But otherwise, it holds up amazingly well. Fantastic. I love it.
Daniel?
Yeah, so I'm in this weird spot, right?
Oh no.
No. Okay, first of all, it's a great movie. There's no denying it's very intentionally slower pace, just how silent. There's very little score. The atmosphere is just perfect, right? It does a great job of just watching your characters make mistakes after mistake. Like, you just know this is gonna pay off in the worst ways, and it keeps going. And like I think the feeling of, I guess, like helplessness or hopelessness at the end, I thought that's all done really well. I think the weird thing for me is that I feel like I've seen so many things that would not exist without Alien, but that are more modern takes on that style, that it's kind of like watching old Star Wars, like the original trilogy for me, where it's like I can appreciate so much about this. They're so like innovative in how they were made. They broke so many like grounds for the genre, for filmmaking, all of these things. But it still feels like kind of an old movie in some ways. In some ways that like there's a few times where my attention's kind of waning a little bit, or I'm struggling to stay engaged. And you know, like I said, I think it's great. I just think, for instance, I was reminded a lot. I think there's a lot of similarities with Sunshine, Danny Boyle's sci-fi horror film as well. And while I actually think that movie doesn't end great, I at times, like, just the kind of like people in like, you know, a team working together, making choices, not necessarily trusting each other, reminded me of that. And so yeah, I think it's a great movie. I'm honestly really excited to get to the next ones, because I think what I've heard, and I may have heard this from you, Donovan, is that, you know, Alien is a perfect horror movie and Aliens is a perfect action movie or something along those lines. And so I think just maybe the nature of an action movie will probably engage me a little more consistently. Just they're going to be throwing stuff at me more often. And so, yeah, I feel like that came out. The tone of that was like I didn't love it. I did love it. And it was like, again, it's like watching that, having watched so many TV shows or episodes of Rick and Morty or things in other sci-fi movies, things in other horror movies that are just obviously that the foundation for this was laid in Alien, right? And like, that's, to me, I can appreciate that really well about it. So
Yeah. One thing that's super interesting that just happened total by accident was today they released the teaser trailer for Alien Romulus, which is by Eddie Falberaz, I believe, who directed Evil Dead and Don't Breathe, which were kind of more modern horror films. And if you watch the trailer, you there is some things he pays homage to in terms of like these long tracking shots, but you can already see the difference in like the expediency of some of the cuts and kind of more of the, obviously they have more technology kind of too to kind of throw at you and all these kind of things. But
and I think part of it, just sorry to quickly inject because I think this out of context, I think part of it is the horror isn't very scary, and part of that is because of the prosthetic. Like it's very hard for me to be afraid of like a rubbery thing running across the table. Like when that's like in the late 70s, when like that's the, you know, that's what we had, like that was everyone's used to. I'm sure that was horrifying. And so maybe part of it is that like, because Alien is a horror movie, like horror is kind of like the genre hook. You're going into it to be scared, right, with a horror movie. And I just wasn't really scared. I mean, you know, like that one jump scare when Dallas gets killed is like, yeah, I jumped a little bit at that, but beyond that, I didn't find anything too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he's just standing there. Yeah. Beyond that, like there just wasn't anything scary, and I wonder if it had been scarier, or if I had just watched this like, you know, when I was a kid, and it would have been terrifying.
well, question. I think this is a big part of it, Daniel. How did you watch it? Did you watch on your laptop?
I watched it on my 4K monitor, but I had these headphones on, so I had like really good. In fact, that's one thing I could really appreciate. Just the sound design was amazing. Like I just thought the mixture of just people and radios off on the sides of like the left and right of the stereo. I liked the way that just there was always like very mechanical sounds inside the spaceship, where it's like steam, psh, or just all these kinds of things. It made it almost sometimes hard to hear the characters, which kind of, I think, added to the feeling of kind of claustrophobic or like unsettlingness of like, you know what I mean? It's like anyway, it's like you didn't always have the best perspective, at least sonically. Yeah. And I thought that
I'm going to let Bruce speak in a second, I promise, Bruce. But I growing up, I loved all like Bruce, you know, I love things about Alien 3, love Alien Resurrection. Of course, the first two are just like this different league. And I loved the first one growing up. The second one always held a special place in my heart because James Cameron's one of my favorite filmmakers ever. And I haven't watched Aliens since before 2012. So before I started film school because I was kind of afraid to watch it after I started film school. But I did. I think my love for the first Alien like quadrupled during film school because I watched it in film school and then they played it at the rave one day, and I left UCA to go watch it by myself. And I'll say this. I've seen Jaws in theaters too, and on TV, it's just kind of like it's a great movie. I don't think it's super scary, but when you see the alien drop down in a movie theater and you're by yourself in the dark, I don't really get scared about much of anything, but that shit is kind of wild. And especially anyway, I think how you absorb it, when you absorb it, are going to play huge factors in all of our enjoyment in this. Obviously, I'm obsessed with the design of the character and like kind of just how that works and its stages and all those kind of things. But yeah, I'm glad you watched it though, and I think you might find more in Aliens than this one. But you're right, the atmosphere, the shot design, the all of those things really work together to, and also 1979. I mean, this is right after Star Wars, and you know, I think The Exorcist is pretty creepy, but there's also we've taken a lot of things to the extreme as we've gotten every decade further in some of these movies, sometimes to the detriment to the genre, other times we've kind of improved some things. But I think having you would never see this movie made anymore because the cuts take forever sometimes, or we're just staying on one perspective, one OTS, and it's like, are we going to cut to Ripley? And like, oh, we do. And you're like, oh, cool. But I like it. I like living. I like these old movies. That's why I made Kronos. Bruce, back me up.
Yeah, no. Well, look, I mean, I totally understand where Dan's coming from, and I think you can make a parallel to 3 years later, Ridley Scott makes Blade Runner, right? And I think
Hmm.
in a lot of ways it's the same kind of thing, which is that creatively, like, we hadn't really seen anything like that, and it's executed so well. But at the same time, when we look at the technology from those times, it everything is kind of simple, right? And so now, I mean, whatever you think of Dune, we could like look at the Dune movies, and we're getting hopefully what we expect is the best of both worlds, right? We're expecting this great narrative that does all this stuff, but we're expecting all of this great realistic technological, approach, especially to science fiction kind of stories. Um, and then you're looking for a great narrative too, and I get it. You look back at Alien and it's incredibly well executed for practical effects, but you're right, it's still 1979, right? And it still shows a little. uh, I think there's something wonderful about that, and I love seeing it because we don't have those kind of movies anymore. At the same time, I also understand that the spectacle will always feel a little bit limited when you watch those older movies because our expectations um, for spectacle are so much higher because of the technology. I also think it's interesting, just going back to to your point, Donovan, about the teaser for this new one, because it's obviously got a much more contemporary style, and yet also it's being directed by a horror director who very clearly seems to be going back to the roots, which
Hmm.
it looks like a bunch of people trapped on a ship, running
Hmm.
from aliens, right? So it is funny that it's also circled back around, and probably there was some thought, especially after the more recent Alien movies that have had mixed success at the box office, that maybe if we're going to do another Alien, we should go back to the beginning, and get inspiration from the very first one, which we'll obviously see, what the movie does, and that might actually work against it, because can you make something comparable to the original, almost like a remake, but with a contemporary style? It'll be interesting to
Yeah.
see what this new one looks like.
I am curious. And one thing I would love, I mean, again, Daniel's like a guinea pig a lot of times on these things because I would love Daniel's opinion on like Prometheus because it's like Ridley Scott 30 years later redoing his Alien movie, but contemporary. And that's a fascinating conversation. I showed Prometheus for like a UCA extra credit thing one time because I wanted their opinion on it. And yeah, I just it's that's a fascinating discussion too. But anyway,
Well, I'd love
let's
to. I mean, like, I'm
yeah,
excited to actually get into the franchise now that I've kind of, I
yeah.
can't jump in halfway through with something like this.
Yeah,
So,
no, you've got a fun time
and
ahead as you get
Prometheus is
to
a
You do.
prequel.
watch
I
all
could
these for the
technically
first time.
watch
Yeah,
Prometheus next, right? Like
Yeah,
canonically.
but yeah,
Maybe I
but
should have
you
don't.
watched
could,
it
you
first,
could,
right?
you should. Yeah.
I'm
No,
kidding.
I don't know. No. Well, what's fascinating, Daniel, I don't know if you know this, but David Fincher directed Alien 3. It's his first
Oh,
feature.
wow.
Yeah.
That
And
is
so, yeah,
interesting.
those first three directors are god tier, and but he just basically disowns it now. But anyway, and it's got its problems. But and then Joss Whedon, he wrote Alien 4, Resurrection.
Wow.
So it's all the whole. There's a lot of
On
meta to this too that I enjoy about all of it. But
It's
it's a
funny on
wild
Hulu.
ride.
As soon as the first one ended, it started playing Resurrection. I guess they don't have the middle two. I think because I
Yeah,
think Aliens is HBO. I did see
yeah.
that. So
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
a, I have a lot. I haven't. We'll save it for next week, but I have a lot of thoughts on Aliens and why the first one's a perfect horror movie, and the second one's a perfect sequel. And I can't wait to discuss that. But let's dive into Alien One here.
Yeah.
This is interesting because like as I was watching it, I was kind of like, oh wow, it's 2 hours long, but it really takes its time going through these sequences, and it almost might be kind of hard pinpointing objectives, or at least not, maybe not hard, but I just think maybe we'll just come to an agreement. I don't know, but I
I mean,
kind of had these.
I
Yeah,
mean,
go
I
ahead.
do. Well, one thing I just noticed, like, I don't think, um, what was his name? Was it it was
Ash.
Kane? He
Okay.
didn't die till like halfway through the movie. I don't think.
Yeah. That's right.
Like
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
halfway through before he finally actually dies. And I was remembering that just going in because I was like, oh, I want to remember when the first death happens. It's a horror movie. That seems pretty late for a horror film. I'm assuming that is not typical of the genre. I'm not hyper familiar with it, so
Well, what's interesting here too is that horror feels like it's one of the more meta genres we have in film. And so you'd be like, oh, we already know what the objective of the movie is. It says Alien, and it's a horror film. You're like, oh,
Right.
the
on a
objective is
spaceship.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, the objective is to survive the alien. So we kind of, it's given to us by the title, but not by the movie until
Yeah.
later. So it's a fascinating meta thing of how I don't know, it's pretty interesting. Bruce?
Well, yeah, I think what we're going to see when we start looking at some of the act goals is, I think there are goals for each act, but this movie, so much of it is built around tension more than anything else. It's like you're just grinding this gear and, it's like slowly it just keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up, right? And really that's happening for the first two acts. Even with having a pretty big act one climax, which we'll get into, you get an act two goal that the characters really can't do much about. We'll talk about that. So if they can't do anything, then what are we doing? And everyone's just kind of waiting, and the tension just keeps going up, right? And they do little things, and you have little small climaxes that we can talk about. But yeah, this movie really is built around that weight and that tension and that suspense. And then obviously the second half of the movie does have quite a bit more action than the first half of the movie, and everything sort of springs into life. Although I shouldn't even say springs, even the beginning of Act Three, things are still going kind of slowly,
Mhm.
with Parker and Brett and Ripley, taking their time looking for the alien, finding the cat. Everything just goes so slow, and it is that buildup, and you just keep waiting and waiting because something bad's coming. To your point, it's called Alien. You know that it's coming without even seeing the movie. And I think that's
Yeah,
part of the movie's genius. And you're right, movies now wouldn't have the patience for that, and
no,
most
not at all.
audiences. It's funny you say most audiences wouldn't have the patience for that, and yet you show almost anyone Alien, and they still really like it.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. But anyway, yeah,
Well, I've got two good movies back to back the last 2 nights because the night before last I was like, "Hey, Kimberly, you want to watch LA Confidential?" Because she'd never seen it, and I'm just sitting there like this because I know how good it is, and I know it's going to take a little buy-in from her because it's a slower start, But we got to the halfway point. She was getting tired. I was like, "Do you want to stop it?" She's like, "No, no, no." She wanted to go to sleep, but she's like, "I want to finish it tomorrow night." So, I feel like if people could just have that buy-in a little bit and just kind of trust the filmmakers, then the payoff will be more than worth it.
Right.
But I have it as these first 15 minutes is kind of like the objective is to find out why they've been woken up, right? So we're in space. It's like this first sequence here, the pod's being opened up early. Mother's introduced, which is this ambiguous, like it's a corporate, which it's a Weyland-Yutani, but it's a corporation. It's space truckers in space, right? So it's this fascinating, like normal people, but on this very maybe not high tech to us now, but high tech back then. And I think it's a fascinating opening and just super creepy. I mean, like here's fun for you. So Kronos, if you guys ever remember when the movie is in my trailer or even in the movie, the title is coming on super slow, just like
Right.
Alien does. I got that
Yeah.
from Alien. So fun
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, I think part of what we're getting at the beginning, of course, before even the characters are woken up, we get a lot of shots of the empty ship. And one of the things that's eventually going to create the problems is that there's 7 crew members on a relatively large ship, and
Hmm.
so the movie is setting up a lot of that early, that there's all these empty hallways and storage spaces and things, that 7 people really can't. I mean, they don't normally have to do anything with it because they're just hauling stuff, right? But yeah, now it becomes or will become a place for perfect place for an alien to hide. But yeah, so we see all this slow stuff, right? Um, and then you're right, um, the beacon wakes them all up. It takes a while. They don't even know why they got woken up, right? We actually establish character first. We get the breakfast, right? Or you
Hmm.
know, breakfast of whatever time it is where they haven't eaten in ages, and so they're all eating.
Seems
We're
like they
meeting
eat
all the
cereal at every
characters.
meal too. So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know what the
Uh,
deal is.
Cheaper in
um,
the budget.
Yeah.
and you're right. And so, at some point, we're told, okay, well, why did they wake? Why are we awake? Are we going home? No, there's this beacon, right? And that becomes, I think, our inciting incident, and then it becomes the goal for the rest of the act, right? Which is to investigate the beacon. What is this beacon? Where is it at? Uh, and all the time, we're getting to know the characters. We're getting to know their crew positions. We're getting to know their personalities. Even once we get to the ship, the planet, and land, we're still, we get Kane volunteering, and Dallas is like, yeah, of course you're volunteering, So even those little touches, right? We're getting all of this character stuff.
It's great that we have, of course, Sigourney Weaver. This kind of put her on the map and made her one of the most badass female characters of all time. But we have also some great actors like Tom Skerritt,
Hmm.
and then I can't think of the actor who plays Kane,
John
but he's
Hurt.
also yeah, John Hurt.
Yeah.
So anyway, a lot of great people in this, and they bring a lot
Aaron
of, like I
Holm.
said, space truckers, so it
Yeah.
feels like real people, and that automatically, if you're making a horror film, I think that's almost. It's almost better than having like the teenagers who are just trying to go off and have sex or whatever, because these are people that you can actually maybe relate to versus, these people who are just trying to cause problems or cause, just basically being self-indulgent versus trying to do a job.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting, and I mean, well, I'll get into this into Act Two because I think it comes up more then. So I'll save that thought till Act
Okay.
Two.
I kind of have at the 25-minute mark, was the kind of the next sequence ending. Basically, the crew of the Nostromo land on LV-426. They have some injuries on the ships. Ash is monitoring the situation. And we kind of set up that Ripley remains on board, right? So like that second sequence was kind of like landing on the ship, kind of putting some of the pieces in place. And then I think it's Dallas and Kane. And maybe it was also the girl, I can't remember her name,
Yeah, that's right.
Lambert.
Yeah. Lambert.
And
Yeah.
they board the planet and they kind of start going through the engineer's ship here. Yeah, which is all tension. It's all atmosphere. Super cool stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, kind of like we said, I mean, especially Act One in particular is relatively straightforward. There
yeah.
there isn't actually a lot of plot to Act
Mhm.
One,
They're
and
going for
and
the
so
MacGuffin. They're just
yeah,
they're just trying to find the MacGuffin,
Yeah.
and they
yeah,
find it, and that's the end of the act, essentially.
yeah, yeah. And we get the face hugger, and it jumps out.
Yes.
smashes
Yeah.
his mask and, end of act one. And it's a very classic structure, by the way, in terms of like, okay, we got an inciting incident. There's this beacon. We have to go see what it is. We found out well, we never really find out about the beacon. I mean, that sort of ends up being a little unanswered, but, we find a thing which
Yeah.
will then influence the rest of the movie, which is
Well, and
the
actually,
face
the
hugger.
beacon may have not actually ever existed because that was all Ash telling them that, right? So it could have just been, we know where the aliens are, and we're gonna make them go to this planet on the way home, rather than there actually being a beacon.
Possibly, yeah.
It's
Whether there was
debatable,
a beacon,
yeah.
whether Mother does it,
Yeah.
later
Well,
on, there's is it in Aliens where the aliens actually set off a beacon to suck people in? I think I can't remember if that's true.
I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's they're not the colony is not answering.
Right, it's not
So
answering. Yeah.
yeah, again, I haven't seen it in
Um,
like over 15
Well,
years, but
and this kind of brings up, as you know, when we get into the Act Two goal, which is right, which is get the face hugger off of Kane,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Save
Save
Kane.
Kane.
Yeah,
What's and we had that great moment, that pivotal moment where like they don't, where Ridley doesn't want to let them in, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's like you everyone knows this is the thing that's gonna be the kill. Like this is why they all die in the end,
yeah.
and Ridley, the only one that wants to do it right. Yeah, of course that she'll be the one saved. But what's interesting, and this is just more of a big picture thing. I think coming into Alien, I just kind of assumed this would just be like like a ship on its way home and an alien attacks the ship, and it's just kind of like alien monster movie run from the alien. And when I finished it, it's actually like, well, actually humans were the bad guys most of the time. Like
Yeah.
the alien is like a creature, but it seems to just be doing what it does, which is like reproduce and feed and like
perfect
stuff like
organism.
that, right? And so like the only reason they're in this meth is because a company of humans decided to send them there for these nefarious reasons. Another human let them in beyond the quarantine. And it's like these human decisions that end up being the reason basically the plot happens, rather than, and of course it's human decisions that allow an ultra powerful unbeatable alien, or almost unbeatable alien into the situation. But I guess that was surprising to me, and maybe that's, I don't know. I mean, like that does seem very genre-y. I mean, it's like it's like the swamp monster being like a product of human pollution, kind of like dynamics that you see in horror sometimes. But it just
Well,
surprised me that it was like, of course there's this ultra powerful bad guy, and if they wanted to write it that way, that it just decided to hunt them, that would have been logical. Like that, there's a movie there if you want to write it that way. But they did it this way, and it just made it. I think probably going back to what you said, Bruce, the tension, like like most of the tension is interpersonal tension. It feels like
yeah,
it's
yeah. A
tension
lot of it
between
is, yeah.
humans and not the
Especially,
alien.
yeah,
First half
yeah.
of the movie, it's all human
Well,
tension, right? Right.
humans, although we learn that it's not humans later
Yes,
on,
yes.
Right.
Well, but he
but
was
no, that
programmed by humans,
yeah,
so
yeah.
anyway.
But no, it's a great point because for as simple as the movie is, it does have a lot of underlying themes. I mean, obviously we've got the whole theme of corporate greed. We've got,
Mhm.
science being harnessed for ill, to create weaponry. Of course, we've got Ripley, and so we've got sexism in the workplace. We've got, and then of course we've just got in general, what we came to understand afterwards is this incredibly strong female protagonist. But we do have a lot of themes, and it's sort of interesting when you think about it time wise, because if you look back in time, well, there was plenty of science fiction or science fiction horror stuff from the 50s and 60s that was just pure entertainment. There was a lot of stuff that was thematically compelling, whether it's Godzilla or oh gosh, what's the movie with the pod people, where all the pods come and people get
Oh, the cocoon, or
no,
no, that's
no,
late. That's later. That's later.
yeah, yeah, no, it's oh gosh,
Invasion of
classic.
the Body Snatchers.
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Invasion of the
okay.
Body Snatchers, where we have this whole like Cold War metaphor and all this
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
right.
And it's sort of interesting because then after Alien, horror really goes pure entertainment for a really long time, right? I mean, Friday the 13th, Halloween
Sure.
movies. There's no themes to these movies, right? They're pure scares. And then over the last 10 years, we started seeing all of these kind of this return of horror as metaphor for all of these things, right? And you get movies
Jordan
like,
Peele's the
yeah, Jordan
headliner
Peele,
of
The
that.
Babadook, you get these movies that are almost kind of returning to, not that Alien maybe had a whole metaphor or anything like that, but clearly there was these larger themes playing out. Um, and the 80s and 90s where you kind of had to go looking for, okay, well, maybe you could find something about like masculinity and femininity or really interpret it deeply. But for most people, it was just fun horror, right? But I don't think anyone watches Alien and doesn't at least think through that those things are happening, right? That the
Yeah.
corporations are evil, that corporations are using science to create weapons, all this kind of stuff. So you're right.
This
I
is
think it's 100% there.
this is really a Union Teamsters movie. It's what this really is about,
Right.
It is.
So-
They didn't follow. Like, I mean, again, it's very interesting that, like, and Ripley's the voice of reason, right? A lot of the time, like
the whole time.
regulations and quarantine and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it is interesting that I agree with you, Donovan. It feels very blue collar. It feels like you know what I mean, which in some ways almost feels like, is the theme of this movie just like do your job, be a cog in the machine, don't question orders, always follow the rules? I don't know. Maybe I'm kidding. No, I don't actually
Well,
know.
but there's a lot of complexity in that, which is interesting
Yeah.
because obviously we know that Ash turns out to be, the tool of the corporation and really bad. But before we do know that, Parker totally bullies him, basically because this guy is the nerd, right? He's the science guy, and they're like the blue collar guys, and basically the blue collar guy bullies the science guy right out of his chair.
Mhm.
And so we get that as interesting. And then, of course, what really becomes interesting, I think, is this idea of sexism and what happens with Ripley. And so right at the beginning of Act Two, we do have this wonderful setup between Ash and Ripley about breaking the quarantine and letting Kane onto the ship with the facehugger. Because even though it's complicated, right? I mean, if we're watching the movie for the first time, especially in 1979, I don't know how much horror conventions we have in our head and how much we're going. Ripley is clearly right, although we might. I don't want to underestimate audiences of that time, but it certainly becomes complicated where you've got the woman who is, stereotypically, especially for 1979, supposed to be the caregiver, supposed to be the one who, would want to break quarantine, and maybe the more hard science guy saying, no, we can't do that. And then you flip the script and you've got the woman saying no. And then stereotypically, she becomes the bitch, right? She's like this unlikable woman who won't let, these people on the ship. And then you've got the guy who turns out to be the bad guy being the sympathetic one saying, oh, no, no, we're going to let him on the ship. I mean, of course, we understand there'll be more to that, and more comes. But in the moment, it's a really fascinating character moment that happens with those two, both in terms of the tension that it creates, but also the way it subverts gender roles and expectations and almost pits us against who our protagonist will end up being, at least in that moment. So
Mm.
it's so fantastic the way that opening of Act Two plays out.
I do have a question for Daniel,
Yeah.
and I kind of would write down every time there was like a shot of Ash making a glance, or it basically was the filmmakers Ridley Scott showing his hand of like Ash is not the good guy. He's
Mm-hmm.
got nefarious
Mm-hmm.
things. Did you know pretty early on? I'm looking for it the whole time, but did you know early on this Ash is not someone to trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think Act Two is where. I mean, I think the pivotal moment is when he disobeys Ripley, because it's interesting, Bruce. Like I felt completely aligned with Ripley in that moment. Like
Sure,
I
yeah,
was just like,
yeah,
there's a fucking alien on his face. That's not
right, right,
sterile. That's not
right.
sterile, guys. I mean, at worst,
But
we're
we
dealing
know
with
all of these science fiction conventions, right? That 40
Sure.
years ago would have been relatively new to
exactly.
audiences.
I
Yeah,
mean, like, in Invincible, which is another great show, we're going to be reviewing the first half of the second season tomorrow. I mean, there's an entire plot that is basically just the face huggers, right, from Alien, but it's just like but it's just face huggers. They don't mutate, at least that we haven't seen, into like, it's more like face huggers mixed with like the star dude from um uh uh Suicide Squad, the James Gunn one, where it controls
Starfish.
them. Yeah, it's like a
Starro.
hive mind thing. But it's literally just alien face huggers. I mean, that's clearly what it is. And like even the plot of it starting, it's from season 1, is this thing of like you can't let them out because then they'll spread and all this kind of stuff. So you're right in the fact that it's like, to me it's obvious, like we shouldn't be letting an alien thing inside the place.
Right. Right.
But I think that is the moment though when I like started to just not trust Ash. I think partly because too, him being the scientific guy that was like, no one wants to go do this. He's like, we have to, he's like all science. It was not in character for him to make an emotionally like,
Right.
oh, I'm just going to do this because I feel too much, kind of decision. And so I think that's the point where I'm like starting to suspect, okay, he kind of wants this thing in here kind of thing. And then, I mean, I never suspected he was a robot, to be fair. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe there was the moment when he's fighting before he's like had his head ripped off and he's fighting with Parker, I think. And he like reaches over and just like squeezes his chest. And Parker's like, like it's almost like Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom moment. And I was at the point, I was like, wow, how is Ash so strong? He must have just like great, hand strength.
In space.
And then I was like, oh, that makes sense. He's a robot. That makes sense.
The most violent thing in the movie is not the alien. It's him rolling up that newspaper and like vertically trying to choke her. That is always
Yeah.
Well,
in
we
my
got to
head.
save that. We got to
was
save that
very
because there's a lot to say
strange.
about that.
Okay.
It
about
is,
that
but
moment.
every time as a kid, I'm like,
Yeah.
There's some
oh,
undertones
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I'm now
Let's
noticing.
let's wait on that. Yeah. But yeah, so I like we said, Act Two sets up this goal of saving Kane, and there's almost nothing they can do about it. Now, of course, they do try, right? They get him in, they stabilize him, they talk. We have a few scenes, and then
The acid blood thing.
yeah, and then exactly, then Dallas is like, okay, we need to get it off, and of course, already we're seeing, right? Ash is like, oh no, Dallas is not like, no, we're gonna do it, yeah, and then of course it's got acid for blood, and so then we have all of that, but that's really the only thing that they actually try to do to save Kane, right? Is literally the only thing they try. It doesn't work, and then they can't do anything else because
it's like, I mean,
almost
the
impossible.
acid,
Yeah.
does the acid sequence lead to like the neck? There's like 2 or 3 moments where Ash is like, Dallas, you got to get down here. And he's like, what is it?
Right.
You just got to get down here. Like,
right.
That happens twice.
It's easier if you see it in person. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is hilarious. But especially the
I was
time
in-
where he's like, he's back up. He's fine. You know what I mean? It's like that one you didn't have to see. You could have said he's okay. But anyway, does the acid sequence lead directly to the he's awake and fine now? Is that
No, it leads right into Ripley and him talking like at the kind of the station. And
Okay.
I was going to ask you guys what you thought. Like I know that the alien is becoming a chest burster, and is what's on the screen? Is he actually seeing like it being like basically a fetus, or is he actually examining the DNA or whatever he's on a petri dish or whatever? Because I was kind of like he like hides it, right? He kind of like
Yeah.
don't look at this. So I was like, is that actually like an X-ray of like it being formed inside his chest? I don't know. I never asked that question before, but I just didn't know what you guys thought about that. So
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, everybody knows that he's got a tube down his throat, and
Yeah.
and Ash gives the explanation that maybe it's breathing for him, and that if they kill it or remove it, that maybe
Yeah.
that'll keep Kane from being able to breathe. But yeah, I've never looked quite closely enough at what he's doing to see
okay.
if there's some
Well,
hint or anything.
And I feel like the movie kind of intentionally doesn't make it very clear. Like the shots, they're always kind of grainy, and like I felt like it's always quick shots. I felt like and pretty tight in, so it wasn't like you had a lot of perspective. So I felt like the movie kind of intentionally made that kind of obfuscated that, where it's just like you get a hint. Like I mean, yeah, I saw the tube going down in, but like I was trying to see like, is there anything in his belly or anything? Because I kind of knew about the chest popper thing just culturally. But I didn't see anything. All I saw was the tube. So yeah, I think the movie kind of does that on purpose to make you feel like to make you feel like you're less informed than you could be, or like, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've got all of this, a lot of what's going on in Act Two is, is that, like you said, Dan, is this, it's character conflict, right? So obviously we've got Ash and Ripley having conflict. Ripley has an argument with Dallas. Dallas doesn't want to talk about, what he knows about Ash, and Ripley, slams the door shut in his face. We then have Ripley, who's supposed to be sort of the boss of Parker and Brett, who we then again have this situation where Parker and Brett are basically being sexist assholes to Ripley, and they,
Hmm.
and they got all the steam going and all that kind of stuff. Um, so this is what's filling Act Two. It's scenes like this that are mostly going through, and then then we get trying to remove the face hugger and the acid for blood, and then later, of course, it's gone, and then we get the where did it go, and we have some fake scares there. But yeah, pretty quickly. And by the way, Act Two is relatively short. We get to uh, Kane coming and having dinner, right? Or
Yeah,
being
great
dinner. Yeah.
sequence. Oh, being dinner. Yeah, I like it, Bruce. Yeah, so of course, yeah, like you said, the classic chest burster scene, and uh,
Pretty
it's like
horrifying. Like
it's
even like
iconic.
that was still one of the moments that was like at least it was pretty gross out.
Yeah.
It was still effective in that way, like in kind of being that kind of body gross
Yeah,
humor or horror, not humor. But yeah, no, I did enjoy that, even though I
well,
kind of knew it was coming. As soon as you see him like putting stuff on his plate, you know,
yeah, well, famously,
or
Lambert, the
slurping down
actress.
that little whatever that is, he's like
Yeah,
slurping down. I'm like,
Yeah.
is that what you would
yeah,
want to
Yeah.
eat
No, that
after an
was very
octopus
great
sat on your
production
face?
design. Yeah. It's all this sort of gross,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
stringy,
slimy,
like
whatever. I didn't know
exactly.
yeah.
what it was. Like,
You gotta
Really
have
smart.
like
Yeah.
you gotta have like Chinese takeout or noodles or something in every
yes,
space movie
yes,
ever. I don't
Right.
know why, but
yes.
you got to. But yeah, so famously Lambert, the actress on the chest, they didn't really tell her it was going to be that gruesome or the blood's going to get on her face, whatever.
Oh, so
And
it's
when
like an honest reaction.
it was actual her because she said like, "Oh my God," whatever, like
She
off
like
camera. And,
like
Yeah.
spins away
yeah,
really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can tell the audio like they weren't trying to capture her audio because it's slightly like it's slightly different there, the quality of the audio, you know?
that is
Yeah.
one thing, and I think this is true of just a lot of movies from a while back. Like they just didn't cover up uh uh sound. What I think Foley, not Foley. What do you get when you get off?
ADR,
ADR. Like
ADR.
ADR.
Yeah.
I feel like it was very obvious anytime an ADR thing
Yeah.
came in because it's just like either like the natural hiss of the room goes away for a second and then there's this like voice and then the hiss comes back up after their line or vice versa. But I think that to me that's just like I think for one as an editor that does a lot of sound stuff, I think I'm just more hypersensitive to it. But I also think
Definitely.
something that they didn't cover up as well or just didn't have the
Oh
means to
yeah.
cover
Yeah.
up as
No,
well. You
there
know,
are those weird moments where you can just tell the audio feels weird or the voice sounds strange. Yeah.
yes. Like just
And
recorded
that
in a
is
different environment or they just didn't
definitely
try to
one of
Yeah,
match
them.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, so I mean, like you said, the chest burster leaves, and now we're kind of the crew is going to, um, oh, I have it, yeah, minute 59, so right at the halfway point. The chest burster escapes. The crew ejects Kane's body into space. Also, like it has made me laugh, but I've always found it unique of like how fucking fast that body flies out that ship. It's
Yeah.
like like a
Yeah,
bullet. And
it's
you're like,
true.
holy shit, which makes
Yeah.
sense, kind of in some weird way, maybe. But anyway, I always thought that was fascinating.
Is this
59
the
minute
movie
mark.
is this well, like I'm sure this was happening, the whole like decompression being sucked out into space has happened before this movie happened.
That's what
I'm sure. I mean it
I was
happened in
kind of alluding
Star
to.
Wars, so yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then minute 59, the crew come up with a plan to capture slash kill the xenomorph,
Right.
which is called the xenomorph, Daniel, if you didn't know. Parker,
Yes.
Brett, and Ripley find the cat. Brett end up going follows. Brett goes solo, of course, and then Brett meets the alien in all its glory right at the minute, 7 minute, 8 minute mark, or hour, 7 minute, hour, 8 minute mark. So we're just kind of starting to get into like, the classic horror situation now where
Yeah. I feel like
we're
it's
just going to be hunted down. And yeah,
for me I kind of broke it up into trying to find the alien and then trying to survive the alien being kind of the
sure.
final act, I guess, or kill or to deal because I feel like that first half before he shows up as a full-sized alien,
Well,
it's not serious, you know what I mean? Like it's just like
yeah.
they're like it's a baby, what harm can it do kind of attitude towards it, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Well, this actually just clicked in my brain right now for the first time. But I mentioned this earlier. Like one of the things that I love about this franchise is just the evolution of this creature. And And I think this movie might be different than some of the others. Of course, we have like a Wolfman movie where a human turns into a werewolf or a vampire and a bat, whatever. But I'm not sure how many movies up to this point, especially horror, where we had a creature that was constantly evolving throughout the movie and
Mm.
presenting new challenges. Because at this point, right before Brett gets killed by the adult version, we've seen the egg, the face hugger, now the chest burster. And so it's like, oh, we can easily go after this thing, right? It doesn't seem as scary or daunting because it's like it's smaller than a cat, at this point.
Yeah.
So I think it's also
The
yeah,
only foreshadowing we've had is the dead body in the ship, right? Like, and
right.
how
The engineer,
giant it
yeah.
was,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
But
Yep. Yep.
you've
Yep.
forgotten that by this point too. That's not front of mind at this
Yeah.
point in the movie, at least for me.
Yeah.
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 The movie continues to do some good foreshadowing. We meet the cat, of course. I think we saw the cat in Act One, but the
Hmm.
cat
We
becomes a
did,
little
yeah.
more present to us in Act Two, and then of course the cat will become a major player.
And Donovan, this is the cat. Isn't this what is being referenced in the Captain Marvel movies? This cat with the cat in
I
the
don't
hole.
know about that.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
I never
The
thought
cat
about
where it's
that,
like an
but
alien with like
yeah,
it's an actual alien and it looks the exact same versus like they always think
I
it's the
guess
alien,
so.
but it's a
That
cat.
makes sense. That makes sense.
This
Yeah,
is a cat
but
that's actually an alien.
Maybe it's been
maybe
inspired by, yeah.
I guess, and maybe
Yeah, I don't know.
maybe it was. I will say that that cat, like the scene where the cat's backing up, like that's like
When the thing's
one of the
behind him,
best
yeah.
animal acting I've ever seen. Cat, you deserve, like that's
I mean,
famous. That
yeah.
shot of the cat's face, like this whole movie, like screen grab. You're like, oh, it's I've seen that a billion times in examples for other things. But anyway, that cat deserves an Oscar. Let's just say that.
We should also mention too that Ash continues to be an issue. The crew gets more frustrated with Ash, and Ash is the one who develops the tool that they have, which is the motion tracker,
Oh yeah.
which of course will only track motion when it's within what
5 meters
6 feet.
or
I
yeah,
can't. Maybe it's
yeah.
5 meters, which is 15 feet. But yeah, it doesn't have a very big range. And then of course we see Ripley ask how it works, and Ash almost seems insulted, and sort of like barely deigns to answer the question,
Well, it's actually Dallas.
micro
Dallas asks
changes.
for a demo. He's like, "Can you show me a demo?"
Well, yeah, but then Ripley asks, and then he says it works on
Oh
micro
yeah,
changes in air density,
micro.
right? And
Yes,
like,
yes,
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
um,
he talks his way out of
uh,
it. Well, I was going to bring this up because this is kind of the same scene here where their team discussed Brett's death, of course, the flamethrower. But then I was going to ask at this point, if you haven't seen the movie before, whose movie is it? I mean, you could say it's the crew's movie, but we have this scene when Dallas goes to Mother, and it's almost acting like he's the protagonist for a second, right? Because it's like he's like the only character that has like this like crisis of I guess life for a second. He's like, well, what are my odds, essentially? So, and then of course that's followed up immediately after his death. So it's like that's a fascinating kind of like whose movie is it up until this point? I didn't know if people might have been thrown off by that because the poster is just an egg,
yeah.
So like what's yeah, so what's any thoughts on
Well,
that or yeah.
yeah, I think there's two things going on. One, of course, is this the classic horror film structure that, I mean, I'm sure there must have been movies that did it beforehand, but I'm not aware of any off the top of my head of having basically a group protagonist, right? That one person gets killed off at a time, and the protagonist simply ends up being the last person left alive to some extent. Um, but obviously, I think there's a little bit more going on there than that, and Ripley becomes increasingly the central character. But you have to remember that when the movie came out, Sigourney Weaver wasn't a big star. I think she'd been in one or two other things, but people didn't really know who she was. Tom Skerritt and John Hurt would have been much bigger stars than she was. So I think that probably played on people's expectations, right? John Hurt was a pretty big star. He gets killed
Where
halfway through the
first one?
movie.
Yeah.
Well, Tom Skerritt's still a big star, and he's the captain, right? Well, he doesn't get killed next. Brett gets killed next, but he gets killed, in the middle of Act Three. So it is interesting then, and I think by the time that's happening, and we're getting, but we're still we're 2/3 of the way through the movie now, in middle of Act Three. Before we start beginning to realize, oh, okay, it does seem to be Ripley, and then we start remembering, the confrontations with Ash and the confrontations with other characters, and the way that she sort of ends up becoming the leader makes sense based on not just the fact that she is third in command, but the way we've seen her behave with all of the other characters, it makes sense that after Dallas is killed, she takes charge. I mean, she says I'm next in command, but still, like, it fits, right? And then of course we don't know, if we've never seen the movie before. I mean, like in 1979, is she gonna get killed next or not, right? But obviously she doesn't.
It's
They are doing a
interesting.
good job of, oh, sorry, I was gonna say real quick that they're doing a good job of, like you said, setting up these little scenes of conflict with her at at least she's involved in all of these moments. That
Right.
way, when it does happen, it feels earned, even though they've told us she's third, it feels earned. I was gonna ask, was there any expectation, I guess, for the final girl? But I mean, when Halloween come out in 81, when did Halloween come out? 81, 80? I don't
Around
know.
eight, I think 80 sounds right. I'll look it up while we're talking.
Okay. Anyway, I was just curious. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, well, just thinking about it. I mean, again, it's impossible not to watch this movie and not know Ripley is. I've known about Ripley before I knew about what Alien was.
78, actually.
Oh, okay. So this
Oh,
is after.
okay.
Yeah, 1 year after. But I do feel like the movie, it does, I feel like, show kind of a critical character flaw of all the characters that die before Ripley. And like I do feel like of course, like Parker and Brett, they're just assholes and sexist, and like just you don't really care about them dying by the end of the movie. I feel like, at least I wasn't like I was attached to them. Dallas, to me, he doesn't take full responsibility. He kind of has that moment where he's like, I'm just the captain, don't ask me about sciencey stuff. And then obviously he's breaking protocol in the beginning with the quarantine stuff. He doesn't care about that. And then of course Ash is Ash. Kane doesn't, well, we don't have enough time with Kane to really know if he's too flawed of a person, I feel like. But Ripley is, and then I would say Lambert, like, her flaw is being more of the typical woman. It's just a little, she can't
Yeah.
emotionally cope with the circumstances, and that is kind of her downfall. In a way, she kind of has a panic attack when whatever. And so Ripley is kind of this like one character with like their morals are kind of true, like they're very admirable, but I think it's also very interesting that like you said, that she's a very masculine feminine character. She's a very, like, she's exhibiting a lot of things that you would like. She's emotional, but she doesn't get too attached, and she's willing to make the hard decisions beyond that. Like, and like she's wants to play tough, and is like, if she has to get rough with the boys to make them listen to her, she's willing to do that kind of
Well,
thing.
and she can be a bit of an ass too, like in Act One when they're trying to figure out where they're at, and
It's
she's
true.
just so snarky, and she's like, "It's not our system," and and of course Lambert has to, like, she's got to do the computer work, and it's not like Lambert doesn't necessarily know either, but she's got to go through the confirmation of it, and Ripley's just like, "It's not our system." She's just being a jerk.
Hmm.
But in a funny way, right? Not in a
Yeah.
way that makes her unlikable, right? By the time we
Yeah.
get to the end, and then after after Dallas is killed, and we've got uh, Lambert freaking out, and she wants to take the shuttle. She wants to blow up the ship and take the shuttle, but of course at that point, and she's freaking out, and Ripley's like, shh, shh, and she's having to like calm her down, and then explains there's not enough seats on the shuttle for them to go,
I
which of
feel like
course
at that point I
ironically
said
turns out
people
to
can
be,
stand. I mean, like,
yeah.
there's not that little of room.
It's a huge ship for not
And
much
there's a
evacuation
freaking
Once
plan.
we see
alien. I
the
think we
ship,
can
there's
cramp.
clearly,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there aren't four sleep chambers.
There's not
Sure.
These
seatbelt.
cryo
Oh, okay. Fair
freeze,
enough.
right?
Fair enough.
So they're in the middle of space. But anyway, yeah. But we shouldn't jump too far ahead, because I think we
Yeah.
do need to talk a little bit about after Parker is killed, or excuse me, after Brett is killed, the sequence with Dallas in the pipes and these crazy, they make no sense from like any kind of scientific or architectural point of view, but these like literal lens um, apertures that
Yeah.
open and close. But of course, from a thematic point of view, they create these birth canals, and they squeak, and
Yeah.
make all these horrible noises and all that kind of stuff, and Dallas is crawling around in these tunnels.
It's been widely documented in multiple everything, books, documentaries, that the design of the alien, the architecture, all these feminine qualities, all these kind of sexual kind of
Openings and
yeah,
yeah.
openings and phallic objects. It's
Yeah.
like the whole movie's laced with that.
Hmm.
And and the creature is, it's being born. It's kind of going through this cycle of growth, and there's a lot to discuss there for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, and it does create that claustrophobia, It's interesting because the first part of Act Three, they're wandering through these bigger halls and these storage places, and the creature could sort of hide anywhere. And then we almost get the reverse, right? Now we're in these tunnels that he can't stand up in. He's got to crawl through. He can go up and down, so the creature can kind of be anywhere. Um, and there is a sort of a cleverness, right, with when he finally gets killed, that the creature is there, it's there, it's there, it's there, right? But it doesn't account for the three dimensionality of the space, right? And so the alien is either above or I guess it drops down. I remember,
yeah, I think it's below him. And one
or
thing
is it below him and jumps up? I can't remember. But yeah,
I
but
thought
either
it
way,
was. I thought
well,
he
I
turns to
mean,
his left with the light, and there's the
well,
alien.
I was saying, I think he goes down a ladder. I
Yeah,
thought,
he's down a
right?
ladder. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
he's like
And he
coming
goes
down, and
down,
he
and
like
then it's
he
there,
turns
right?
away from
Okay,
the camera, and then it's
right.
down that.
Okay.
Okay,
Like
yeah. But when
And
they
one
think it's
thing,
gotten to him, I guess it's been below him, right? And then he
yes,
goes
they
down
think it's a
to
different
see,
direction, or
right?
like yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, or maybe she even says like I think it might be that he looks towards the camera first because she says it's that way,
yeah,
and then he just doesn't see it, so then he looks the other way, then it's there, and then yeah,
yeah,
it did.
one thing I want to point out, and it's one of those things, like, again, it's hard for me sometimes because I've said this to so many people, and like it's ingrained in just into like my own history. But one of the more important things to talk about the creature of the alien, the xenomorph, is the fact that you don't see it a whole lot. And when I have talked to people about making a horror film, I've always used Alien as an example of, like, it's a great way. I mean, A, it just saves you budget, but also it's a great way for it's like Jaws. This is Jaws in
yeah.
space. You formulate the what it is so much worse in your head than what it is when you actually see the full creature. And so you're seeing pieces of it, its mouth, its mandibles, all these kind of things. And so it makes it that much more terrifying because typically what's in our head is more terrifying than what anyone else can come up with. So I think it's always a fascinating thing. And not until the very end do you see it fully. And it is its most creepy whenever you are just getting glimpses of it and these like literally frames of it during the movie,
Well,
for
and that
sure.
really goes hand in hand with the movie built around tension and suspense, right? Because
Right.
if you're not showing the creature, then you just have to show the people hiding, looking, searching, whatever,
Dying.
and then you just have brief moments, right, where they come together, and then off the creature goes again, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so then it is interesting after Dallas dies, right? And Lambert comes up with the idea of blowing up the ship and escaping.
Did we skip over the fight with Ash?
No, so
Not yet, no.
yeah,
Okay,
this
this
is
is right
what's
after. Okay, yeah.
interesting, right? Is that after he dies, they have this conversation, and Ripley says, "We're gonna do the same plan, right? We're not changing
Yeah,
anything. It's the best plan we have. I will go into the tunnels, right? Because she rejects Lambert's plans. Like, we're not leaving anyone behind. We're not drawing straws. But she goes in to talk to Mother, right, to try to get more information. And
That's right.
so she never gets a chance to put the plan back into action, which is actually pretty smart, right? Because I mean, it would feel kind of repetitive if we then had a whole nother, there's not really, I guess in a way there's sort of two sequences here, but yeah, it just like, or maybe we even kind of have three sequences, I guess, if we've got uh, Brett getting killed in the first one, Kane or Dallas getting killed in the second one, and then sort of the last one at the end. But yeah, repeating the second one twice would make no sense. So they're gonna do it. But yeah, she goes in and she gets answers from Mother, and then we get this great climax, kind of an extended climax with Ash.
I've
Yeah,
got to say
it
real quick.
is. It is like you keep thinking he's dead, and then he like comes back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to say one thing that's always bothered me, and I have to like watch it every time, is when they're putting down Ash's neck, and
Yeah.
then it
With
just cuts to
the
the real
bad
one.
cuts. Yeah.
I'm always
Right.
like, God dang, why
Yeah.
can't you guys cut away to something else every time? But also, it kind of works, but also it doesn't. So it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
irritates me. Anyway, I have to always bring it up.
But
But
that's
yeah, yeah,
that's the exact kind of thing where, of course, we wouldn't see anything like that in movies
sure,
today, and yet it's also part of the charm, right?
it
It's
is.
part of why it feels
Yeah,
handmade and feel,
Yeah.
I mean, not
Yeah.
real exactly, but yeah, just there's something appealing about that.
it is. It's weird. It's a weird thing. But yeah, it's a
And
great,
I also
great.
want to say
Yeah, go
this
ahead.
is, I mean, this has been true the whole time, but man, this movie is so wet. There's so
Yeah.
much liquid
Dude, someone
dripping
there is like
and
spraying shit
spewing.
between
I mean, when
takes.
Brett
Yeah.
dies, I remember when Brett died. I'm like, I don't think actors are wet like this anymore in movies. I was just like, can I remember any movie where I've seen an actor this wet? I can't think
Yeah,
of
it's
it. He's
grimy,
so
dude.
shiny.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And then of course, like when I guess when Ash dies, he's like spewing robot milk out.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And then like
Yeah.
the alien later,
Yeah.
like the alien's mouth is like dripping like a faucet. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like
Oh, yeah.
it looks like water though. It almost I think it kind of took away from it because it didn't look like saliva that's like sticky or dripping. It was just like like trickling out of his mouth consistently like water. Anyway,
So
yeah,
we got to
very
ask,
wet
and
movie.
since you said that you didn't see it coming, that Ash was a robot.
Yeah.
When we first see the milk coming down, and then when it like, what did you have pretty
I
good
thought he
freak
had
out
been
moment? Like
yeah,
what
I
was your
thought
reaction in that?
my first thought was like, was he already an alien? Had the aliens already invaded Earth and he's like an inside agent that's an alien that's
Right.
like going to get more friends to bring back to Earth? Like, yeah, I mean, I thought I thought he was like some sort of alien or alien controlled creature. I did not guess robot at first. Yeah, I'm sure the milk was
It is
effective in
kind of
that way.
interesting too, because now that I think about it, I never put this together before, but when they're like, when they're finally like closing in on killing Ash for good, and he starts flopping around a whole bunch, it's basically the same flopping that Chris does in Blade Runner,
Oh,
as a robot
100%.
also. Yeah, I mean
Hmm.
it's a little
Wow.
more out of control in Blade Runner, but you can kind of see some thoughts about like
Yeah.
robots' bodies out of control. It's clearly something that Ridley Scott was thinking about between those two movies.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, even thinking about the later films, because it's so, again, it's so, they indirect this like this perfect thing that hasn't been like you don't know all the things that I know. And so like it's just like there's so many things in the later films it's like fascinating to talk about, specifically about the androids or the robots, whatever, and where they go and the kind of how they all tie into things.
Right.
But yes, it's a fascinating sequence. It's pretty violent, as we said earlier, shoving the. I won't lie to you. This makes me feel like a dumb filmmaker. I never once thought that was like a phallic thing. I never thought of it like
It makes
that. You know
sense
what I'm saying?
completely when he
It
mentioned it.
makes
I was
sense
like, oh my
now that
God,
my whole
that
life I've
took
been
on a
reading
whole new
about.
took on a whole new
Yeah.
like meaning or
As
tone.
soon as you said it, I went, "Oh my Jesus!" Like I just don't. I don't
Yeah.
always look for that stuff in
I
movies.
know, I know.
So anyway, I was
No,
like, "Oh
but
my God!"
this one is great because we got to make sure we do draw all the connections here. You said a newspaper. It's not a newspaper. It's a porn magazine.
Oh,
Oh my God.
He rolls
interesting.
up, yeah, because there are pictures of porn in the
Yeah.
sleep style. We don't, probably Brett's. We don't really know,
Sure.
that they end up in. So
Yeah, it's the gross wet guy.
he
Definitely his
rolls up
porn
a
mags.
porn magazine, right? So very phallic, and obviously there's sort of a rape going on, but it's also a tube, right? So it is the same tube that the alien puts down the throat uh, of Kane, right? So we've got all these great connections. It
Well,
connects to
and
the aliens, connects to the phallic thing. It has a gender or sex thing going on. All of these things
and
are
it's
all
not
happening,
it
right?
doesn't seem like a very effective thing to smother someone with
Of course,
either.
from a plot perspective, it doesn't really
Yeah.
work to
No,
try to
and
kill
that's why I
someone
feel like
by
when you
shoving a magazine in their
Well, that
mouth.
solves the
when you
mystery of why. As a kid, I was always like, "Why is he?" I always thought it was just
yeah
fascinating, and now I know. It kind of ruins it for me, honestly. I thought it was
no,
just
I
like a
know it does.
whole
It kind of is
violent
like, oh,
thing.
that didn't make sense at all in the world. That was kind of this like
Yeah,
moment, and maybe they thought it did, but it is like, I mean,
I thought
like
he was just a robot, just like this. This will fucking do it. That's right. I don't know. I just That's what I always thought, you know.
Well, I
You
mean, if
know,
we want to give
Humans'
it a
weakness
plot
is paper,
explanation,
right?
Ash is bleeding the milk at this point. He has been at least slightly damaged, so maybe he's just not, thinking
yeah,
100%
Maybe so.
clearly.
But I
I
mean,
don't know.
it's now very evident. Like there was a lot of thought
thought.
put into,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
yeah. And but I just didn't catch that, and that like, yeah, but I did catch that. Like I mean, like, how is that gonna smother her? I mean, like he's
Right.
more likely to like snap her neck by pushing hard than like
Yeah,
smother her
yeah.
with the end of a magazine. There's lots of places for air to get in her mouth.
I mean, I mean, okay, we know what it means, but why? What is he trying to say? I mean, like just like there's all these over or dominating men in this world, and it takes a woman to defeat the alien. I mean, what's
I
the I
don't
don't
even,
understand.
yeah,
I
I don't even know
don't
if it's
what
saying
yeah,
anything. I
what's
think
the
it's just
yeah
drawing a lot of interesting parallels between how this man is trying to kill this woman, the way it goes to aliens, and then it goes to this phallic stuff. But it
It's
also maybe doesn't make sense because, or or at least if you take it to its logical conclusion, the alien that's laying the eggs, the face hugger, I mean, I guess is female. I mean, if it lays eggs, so the tube is female, but now the tube is also male. So it's not like you can extend this metaphor and then connect up the sexism of
no.
a rape with a or an oral rape with a porn magazine and the connection with the aliens. It doesn't logically all come together and create some beautiful metaphor. It's more
No.
just it has some interesting resonances with other themes of the movie. But yeah,
It's
I
almost
don't
like one of
think.
those things that you think of and you're like, "Ooh, what if this we did this?" And you're like, sounds so cool. I'm not sure what it means, but let's just do it." Like that
Yeah,
that's almost like the that feels like it came out of one kind of moment like that where
yeah.
like it almost
Especially,
it may
yeah,
seem more like it's saying more than it actually is. Kind
sure.
yeah.
of
Well,
thing,
and
you
in
know?
and in the end, we have to remember Ash is not a man, right? He's a robot, and maybe he's a robot that's been programmed to be like men. Obviously, he looks like a man, um, but in that sense, it even removes, some of the sexism. Although,
Sure.
to be fair, Ash has been sexist, I guess, in the sense that he overrode um, Ripley's order, and then Ripley reminds him, like, I
Yeah.
outrank you, when
Yeah.
they're off the ship, I'm in charge, and he just sort of passes it off. So he has been
But is
sexist,
that
but at the same time, he's a
sexism?
robot.
It's
I
not.
didn't read that part as
I don't.
sexism. I mean, that
It's
was
not
he just does that
sexist.
because he works for the
He
company.
he wants the alien on the ship. I feel like
Well, in
that's
the
it. Don't
end,
matter
yes,
who.
but I mean, at the time
Sure,
as it happens,
She doesn't
what
take
we
him
see
saying that to
as
her seriously. Yeah.
but we see a
gotcha.
guy who has disrespected a female giving orders, and then even when she reminds him, he doesn't
He
care. You're
brushes it
right.
off.
He has ulterior motives that turn out not to be sexist. And that's part of what I'm saying is that
Right.
having a robot try to orally rape her with a phallic symbol doesn't really reflect back on the sexism that she's experienced because other things are happening. So I
Yeah.
agree with you that it doesn't go anywhere. It's just kind of visually resonant and kind of cool, and I shouldn't say fun because it's still a rape. It's like
Yeah.
awful, but fun in a cinematic
It's
metaphorical
fun.
sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
But it
it's
doesn't. But
fun.
doesn't. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't go anywhere to something bigger.
I wonder if there's any kind of parallel with the whole like alien that has a tongue with an alien on the end. I mean, it has like a pole that it sticks out with another mouth on it. Like the whole alien inside an alien
Yeah,
mouth thing.
it's
There's a
tongue.
little bit.
Yeah.
That's a tongue
Um.
with a mouth.
Yeah. I don't know. I know what it does, but or what its purpose is, but
I think that's the most thing I've been to. So like the amount of times that get used in popular culture, like
oh yeah.
a small head
Well,
coming out of a big head, like in Aliens.
not to jump to next week, but there is some interesting. I say interesting. It's very on the nose, but in a good way. Parallels between like aliens and of course Ripley. And spoilers, Ripley's in the second one.
I
Yeah.
didn't know
But
that.
and
But
so
yeah, and we should note that what we're talking about with the sex of these things, I mean, that very much plays into later movies, not just
yeah,
with
Mm.
Ripley being female, but with the nature of sex as it has to do with the aliens
yeah,
and mother aliens and child aliens and whether they're sons or daughters. That I mean, that repeats through
yeah.
many alien movies. So this whole idea. I guess less of gender and more of sex and motherhood and things like
and
that
and
Gender
does
creation
roles.
become,
Yeah.
and creation in general. I mean, which
yes,
really touch
yeah,
upon, which really also does in Blade Runner, right? But I mean, really in like the last two prequels, it's like full on creation
yeah,
myth stuff. It gets
yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
ideological.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can kind of keep going here. So after this intense scene, the crew goes to shut off the air ducts. Ripley
Well,
tries
yeah,
to
just
get
yes,
yeah, go
just
ahead.
slow down. Just because of the key plot point is we do have Ash revealing, right? They do plug his head in, the
Yes, yeah, sure.
bad practical effects notwithstanding. Um, and he basically tells them they have no chance, right? They're not
Right.
going to survive, and we have this whole
It's
thing
the
where Lambert's
perfect
like, you
organism.
admire it,
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
all this
yeah.
kind of stuff. Uh, and that becomes our Act 3 climax, right? Their goal is to catch and
Yeah.
kill the alien. Obviously, they fail at that. And so then their Act 4 goal becomes the goal that Lambert had suggested 10 minutes ago, right? Which is to blow up the ship and escape on the shuttle, right? And so that then gets to where you were going.
How many? I mean, I guess now they have the right amount of people for the pods because Ash has
Exactly.
been,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. And
terminated.
ironically, they didn't do the plan earlier, but Ash wasn't someone they would have wanted to bring
Yeah.
anyway. They actually
Right.
had the right amount. They just didn't know it yet. So they
Ash,
have
he
to
So
does
find
wake
that
up in
out.
the pods with him though, right? In the
yeah,
beginning of the movie? Pretty
I
sure.
think so, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they mentioned that he was brought
He's
on
faking
last
it. Yeah,
second,
yeah, yeah.
and that he
Right.
was just
Right.
all these other
He
things.
was
But
just
yeah,
doing like a screensaver when they were pretending to
Uh,
sleep. Yeah.
well, I mean, also, well, again, later movies. I mean, there's an argument to be made. Like, is he sentient? Is what's the
Oh,
what
sure.
is sentience? What is these kind of
yeah.
things? So, yeah, Ripley is so crew goes off to shut the air ducts. Ripley tries to get Jones the cat. I'm not quite sure why the cat's so important all of a sudden. And then Lambert and Parker die.
I did
Right?
Yeah.
also, I will say with the cat, I did at times expect the cat to have been infected with like a chest person.
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
thought that could have happened at any point, and like that would be like
A
a.
Chess
chess
person.
person. A chess
I
person.
yeah, I just thought that I
Very
was like that.
2024 of you, Daniel.
That's a very
Yeah.
easy way to like think you're safe, but then you're not, kind of thing.
I will say if I'm going to criticize the movie, it's this final act. I think there's a lot of small things. One of them is what you said, which is the relationship between Ripley and Jones the cat hasn't been developed. So it does feel, I mean, yeah, it just shows us another facet of Ripley, but we could have had any little bit at the beginning, any time earlier just to show that she cared. Even when the cat escapes, the only reason that she's like, Park or Brett, go get the cat is not because the cat might get eaten by the alien, but because they don't want it to show up on the sensor again. She doesn't
Yeah,
seem to care. So
yeah,
I agree with that.
It's kind
The
of like a reverse pet a puppy moment. Like instead of happening in the beginning of the movie, it
Right,
happens
it
at the
happens at
very
the end.
end. Yeah.
Just in case you
Yeah.
haven't cared enough about her, she really loves the cat.
Yeah.
Also, the
It
cat is
also,
like hissing at her sometimes while she's holding
yeah,
it. So yeah,
we do get this crazy MacGuffin of, I mean, you said the air ducts, but they have to, I don't know, they have to get all of these air tanks, I guess maybe to get more oxygen to bring onto the shuttle. But the point is that they get sent to this other part of the ship to fill up this giant cart filled with, and it just feels a little, you wish there could have been a stronger plot reason to
yes,
really make these characters have to go by themselves to another part of the ship because they're pushing this clunky cart. It's got all these things
yes.
on it, and it feels very much like a forced MacGuffin,
Well, the
that they
plot
have
just
to
kind of
do.
fades into the background for this last act. I just like I
Yeah,
did.
and
It
so
was just I didn't it. It didn't seem to make the things that are present are they're just got to survive. That's like all I need to know to watch them do what they're doing
yeah,
in a way.
I always thought it
I
was,
also have to go
I'll
ahead.
say,
Go ahead.
I always thought it was super weird that she, like, every time I've seen this movie, that she, like, does the automatic detonation and she leaves and she has to go back and, like, try to stop it,
Turn
but
it
then
off. Yes,
Yes,
that's another really weird
yes,
thing
yeah,
that
yeah.
once she does it, she goes, yeah, we're jumped ahead a little bit, but yeah, after Lambert and Parker are dead, then yeah, she has to, and then just to auto destruct the ship. I guess that kind of works. Like that's not something you want to sort of have to do by accident. But man, it is a really complicated thing. Open
Yeah.
this thing and press
Oh,
all these
yeah.
things and do all this other stuff. And then she goes back, and now she thinks the alien's on the shuttle, so she has to go back and redo it. She spends all this time trying to redo it, and it's too late, which just it does feel a little odd.
They're just
I also have
backtracking.
to,
Yeah, a lot.
yeah, exactly. Anytime characters backtrack, it always feels a little weird in a movie. I also have to point out the production design thing that has always driven me crazy about this movie and Star Wars, which is hallways where there are doors and there are raised things off the floor. So if you notice, they're pushing the cart down the hallway, and there's this doorway.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there's this step that's like this big that you're supposed to get to with the cart, and then how do you get the cart? You have to like lift up the cart. Like who designed this ship?
Yes,
And it's
yes.
really funny because the Star Wars problems have the same. Star Wars movies have the same problem. R2D2 is like always rolling through places, and then there's like this bump coming up ahead that he shouldn't be able to roll over. We always cut, and then we're somewhere else, and he has successfully rolled over
Yeah.
this weird opening bump in
See,
doorways.
that's why they had to have that
He's got
sequence in the
tiny
Attack
jets,
of the
dude.
Clones. Exactly.
Well, he does
that's the
now,
reason
yeah.
that
I mean,
exists.
eventually, yeah. But we never saw that.
No, you're right.
Especially the first movie. So yeah, so in a lot of ways, I mean, there's this ticking clock, right? And a big part of horror is the ticking clock, and they have so much time to do something. It always has felt just a teeny bit forced to me, right? Getting these big tubes and then her having to turn off the self auto destruct sequence, right? But obviously it does what a horror film is supposed to do. It separates characters. Bad things happen to them. They don't know where the alien is. You know, is it on the shuttle? Is it not? Right? She thinks it's not. She finally, and poor Jones, right? Poor Jones is in this like glass or this plastic box. She's constantly like throwing and dropping during this time after she gets him in it. Until,
My
of
favorite
course,
thing
finally,
about
yeah.
those are my favorite thing about the end here is that alien is just like, I'm fucking tired, dude.
Okay, this is where I was like, did the
All
alien
right.
get
So
hurt?
yeah, so we're on the
Did
shuttle. Let's
did
yeah,
the
we're on
alien
the
get
shuttle.
hurt
Yeah.
somewhere? And it's like it's
He's just like,
injured?
yeah, he's like, I'm just
Two
gonna
things.
stretch and
I really thought I was like I must have missed a moment in a sequence where someone got a punch in or something. Obviously, why would he just be like, oh hey, I'm gonna go back here? And then two, I'm like, was steam established as a weakness of the alien at all?
It's really unclear. He seems to be hiding back there, but also,
yeah.
yeah, she sees him and he seems incredibly sluggish, if nothing
Yes,
else.
yes.
If not taking a nap. It's really kind of unclear what exactly
Last
he's
night I
Like it was so
rationalized.
confusing. I was like, I just must have missed something. I must have missed like they in one of the deaths. Like I really thought like what's his name, Parker, maybe. I was like, Parker, maybe must have gotten
get a
a shot
blow-in
in
or
because
something,
they were
right?
using the steam then too. And I'm just like, yeah, that's the only thing that makes sense to me because he like it looked injured. Like it was like, yeah, weird.
Well, I last night I rationalized it that it's like an animal. It's just like in this particular moment, for whatever reason, it's not, I don't know, hunting. I don't know. So that's how I rationalize it in my brain. It's
Well,
still
so
oddly really weird. So
it
And the
does
steam
make
thing
sense.
too, a little bit.
Yeah, it does make sense that it's going to hide until, like,
Yes.
first of all, it has to get off the ship, right? And the part of the idea is that it's smart enough to know that they're self-destructing the ship, right? So it has to get off the ship, and presumably it's not going to reveal itself until Ripley has flown away, right? So it does have to hide, and maybe that's the idea because it probably can't fly the shuttle
It makes
away
sense
from
up
the
to the
ship
point.
by itself.
It
I
makes
don't
sense up
think
to that
it's not.
point. It's
It's
the
not
point
that
where she
smart, though.
sees it and it looks at her.
Yeah.
And she runs away and hides in the coat closet. And then
Right.
she's like, oh, it's just not chasing me.
Yeah, and by that time,
Oh,
it probably the
okay.
shuttle has gotten away, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
And
It
the
doesn't
steam,
entirely
the
make
steam
sense.
feels like it
but-
comes out of nowhere. Like why does the steam work?
do you guys think? I think it just pisses. I think it was just like sipping on martini,
But
relaxing. It
it
pissed
was
him
like
off.
it was like crying like it had been hurt, and then it like falls on the floor like it's
I
injured.
don't know. Maybe it's hot steam. Maybe it's not cold steam.
It's the perfect organism
That's-
except when there's hot steam.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
my question.
it is susceptible to fire, right? So I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe the steam, maybe
Sure.
it's just the hotter it gets,
It just
the worse
seemed to
it
be
is. I don't know.
very affected by it. Like it was like
Yeah.
squealing in pain.
I agree. Like I said,
Yeah.
Act 4 definitely feels the most problematic in terms of these little moments.
Well, I was going to say, do you guys, and you said this kind of, Bruce, but I've never attributed the alien being, it's not going to pilot, it's not going to like put that thing into drive and drive away on the ship. Like it's just an animal. It's just like a killing.
mean,
it's just like
the alien skeleton on the ship was in a pilot seat, right?
well, that's not
They
the
weren't the same
xenomorph.
species.
No. That's
Oh,
that's
okay.
that's a long
Yeah,
story.
you gotta keep watching. It gets a little
Long
confusing.
story.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I do think that we're supposed to understand that the alien is smart enough to know that the ship is self-destructing. I believe
Really?
that. I think that's
I
true
did
because
not pick that up personally.
I thought it was just
I thought it was random.
Yeah, I don't
'cause
think it's random.
His head looked like a pipe on the wall until it moved, right?
Yeah.
yeah, but
Well,
again, it's hiding, right? It has to hide on the shuttle because it can't just go on the shuttle and then when Ripley gets on the shuttle and the shuttle still docked to the ship and it kills Ripley because
Why
then
did Ripley
it's
think
going
that
to be
it had got
destroyed.
off the shuttle after she?
because she literally ran back and it wasn't where the last place she saw it was.
Okay.
Which is the weird
It
double
was
Wasn't it
double
like
blocking the
back.
door,
walking,
right?
though?
It
It
was
was like,
between
oh, that's
her
right,
and the
that's right, that's
shuttle.
right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
then she goes back, and then when she fails at turning it off, she comes and now it's gone. So
Yeah.
I think we're supposed to, whether you can call it instinct, you can call it whatever you want, whether it has figured out some ways to understand basic aspects of language, whatever, that it knows that it has to get on the shuttle to escape. I mean, I feel
think
pretty
you're right.
confident in feeling that.
I think you're right. I don't think I got that. That didn't come to me clearly in the movie.
Yeah.
I think thinking about it now, I think you're probably right.
I don't think you're necessarily
but-
supposed to think it in the moment,
Sure.
because of course, once the alien comes out, you're just thinking about what's Ripley going to do to survive, right? But then when you kind of, okay, well, why was the alien on the ship? I think you sort of piece the pieces together and why it was where it was and what's going on and go, okay, I think the alien knows that it has to get off the ship. This is the way it's going to survive.
Yeah. It does make Ripley's triumph a little less impactful, I think, just because it does feel like, well, why did it have to? What was different about Ripley, or what did she do differently that ultimately made her not just escape and like get off the ship, but prevail over the alien? And
logic was her big weapon. I think that throughout I might say weapon, but it was her
sure.
consistency in. I mean, the opening of the movie, she's like, "This is not our system. Don't let it in."
It's not like she makes a final logical decision that is like, oh,
Sure.
that's why, it had to be her. She was the only one that could have survived this because
I think the thing that sort of makes her succeed where no one else does, honestly, is her bravery, right? I mean,
Sure.
and I know it's a very
believe
simple
that.
thing to say, but when you think about the other characters and how they react when they come face to face with the alien, they tend to just freak out. And she comes face to face with the alien and she doesn't freak out, right? Now she gets a bit of an advantage because it seems to be really sleepy or whatever, but she never.
It's a little bit. It's like you get to fight a
He got
grizzly
drugged.
bear, or you get to fight a hibernating grizzly bear. Which one sounds hard?
But she doesn't give up, right? She's tenacious. She doesn't freak out. She keeps thinking. Where
She
other
keeps her
characters,
cool.
yeah, exactly. She keeps her cool. What I think other characters haven't. Even, I mean, not to say that Brett had a lot of choices, but when Brett sees the alien, I mean, he just stands there for a really long time, just kind of staring at the alien until finally it hits him. He doesn't even try to run. I mean, he's just like, oh, I'm screwed, right? And I think that kind of happens with a lot of the characters. I mean, Parker tries to fight it. But she remains cool and calm under pressure, and she immediately, she backs up, she gets in the closet, and she figures out a solution, right? She doesn't panic.
Yeah, I mean, she uses herself as bait by the end of it to get him in position, and that's obviously very brave.
It is. It's funny. We like Matt and Mike and Cameron, brother, all these people. We've had these conversations so many times. Like, what would you do if you saw an xenomorph? Like, would you just sit like fucked, or would you? We've had that conversation strangely a lot actually in our life.
I can just imagine you guys like eating it in Italian in Olive Garden, and Donovan just going, Matt, a xenomorph just walked in. What do you do? That's just
It's pretty accurate, Daniel, honestly.
Yeah.
But So I was gonna say the movie. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead,
I'd ask you
Bruce.
guys a question since
Okay.
we've talked about some of the sexism that Ripley experiences, and of course one of the reasons that Alien is so well loved is because Ripley was such a
Yeah.
strong female character and has been so influential for so many years. But of course, there is a lot of criticism or discussion of that final scene where basically she gets ready to get in the pod and she's wearing this teeny tiny little
Yeah.
bikini bottom and this shirt that's cropped and doesn't even seem that it's like two sizes too small for her. What do you guys think of that? Does that feel just sexist to sort of give us a little bit of
You
To me, I
know,
said, "Oh, now
like
she's
how
the
do
final
you
girl. Now she's the
yeah, so
final girl. She
exactly.
wasn't. She
So what
wasn't
did
naked
how do
enough."
you guys view sort
it's
of
interesting
that
you brought
choice
that
at the
up
end?
It's a
Yeah.
bit.
because,
Yeah. Go ahead. You.
well, I was going to say last night was the first time I've seen this movie like probably 15 times. Part of it was because growing up as a kid, I didn't really care about the hot girl as a really young
Yeah.
kid, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But honestly, my whole life, I've never been attracted to, I don't think Sigourney Weaver, to me, it's very attractive. So for me, my whole life, I was never like oogling at this moment. This was just someone because they wake up in this state also, and also I never noticed either till last night. I've seen this movie a lot that I think it's Sigourney Weaver when they wake up in the pods. It's almost like a Fifth Element thing. There's like one strip
Right.
across the breast. I've never noticed that before.
I
Yeah.
didn't
Because all
notice
the
that.
all because all the men are wearing like basically underwear and like tidy whities, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so, but last night I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of sexual, and I was like, wait, am I attracted to Sigourney? Like, I literally last
It's
night I
like your
thought, oh,
taste buds change every
I
7 years,
literally thought
so
that
do
last
your
night. I was like,
your
oh,
taste.
I was
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like, am I attracted to this kind of woman now for some reason? I literally thought that last night. So
Hmm.
anyway, I don't know.
I found it very voyeuristic. I mean, it just felt like all of a
Maybe the pants
sudden
up
we were
her.
just
Yeah.
gonna watch Ripley undress. And the movie
Yeah.
has not done this at all in this way,
Right.
just kind of male gaze up and down her body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it did feel a little bit just, I guess, just like, okay, like, I guess we have to do that because of, I don't know, it's a movie and it's a last final girl. I don't know what the
I
societal
think it
just
makes her
expectations are,
vulnerable.
but
I mean, I think on a narrative level, it's like she's literally done the impossible, and now you put her in a state where she is more vulnerable than ever, where she's by herself in space, naked,
but being
basically.
naked makes her no more vulnerable than having clothes on.
No,
I
I
disagree.
disagree. I disagree too. And actually, I think it's interesting because I do think that putting characters in less clothing does make them more vulnerable. It's just that so often we've only seen women be put in that vulnerable position, but a naked man, I think, would feel just as vulnerable, right? I mean, there's just like
John
so.
McClane. Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
his clothes are coming off. He's getting hurt.
right. But even especially like your testicle area and being
Sure.
naked or exposed in that area, there is almost that natural inclination to sort of want to cover it up. So it's hard because there is an argument that says, yeah, you put a character at their most vulnerable, and I think when someone is closer to naked, they are more vulnerable. It just makes everything that much more edgy and worse. Having said that, I don't think there's any. I think we probably could all agree that there is some gratuitous,
Well,
flesh
it's
going
just the
on at
tilt.
the same
That's the
time,
thing.
right?
It's
It's
the
almost
tilt.
like the cinematography style changes for a few shots in a way. Like you got this slow plotting, like very particular cutting, and then for a
Yeah.
few seconds it's just like a glamour shoot with
Yeah.
Sigourney, and like
Well, and
like
and also, yeah, we could also argue that that kind of shooting lulls you into thinking that everything's okay, right? That
Sure.
it's almost like, oh, well, if we have the
yeah.
space to
It's hard
sexualize her,
as a
then
genre
everything's
thing. It
yeah,
was like, oh, now she's really going to be in danger. As
right.
a just as a
Exactly. Now that we really, yeah, especially
yes.
what happened afterwards. So it is interesting because I think you can say that it works sort of from a plot perspective or a tonal suspense vulnerability character perspective, and also say there's some sexism involved in
Well,
it at the same time. I mean, I
it's
think both can be true.
I think you're right. I think because I do see the side of it where it does make her more vulnerable. I think in some ways it surprised me in kind of a way because I knew of Ripley as this, like, she's the different final girl. She's
Right.
she's the one that's in charge, the one that's not just, has no power, the one that's not completely sexualized. And so when this
Yeah.
happened, I just had no expectation that a scene like this would happen. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it
Yeah.
happens right at the end. It was kind of like, whoa, okay, this took a turn in a different direction for a second.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think
And
that was even part of it.
yeah, I think the movie coming out in 1979, and given how much positive there is about the character of
Absolutely.
Ripley, I mean, I certainly
The
don't doesn't
positives
it doesn't
overshadow that.
undermine, yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't undermine everything, but it is unfortunate because it just, Ripley is so strong. It just feels like that one little blemish right at the end that it's like, oh, could have just done that a little bit different. We wouldn't necessarily, but still, yeah, I don't think that takes anything away from the
No, it
impact
didn't.
Ripley has had
Absolutely.
as a
Well,
character
don't
and
worry too
for
much, Bruce,
culture.
because next week is Aliens,
Yes.
and there's more than enough, right, justice involved here.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I'm
yeah, and that's
excited.
a fantastic movie.
yeah.
So, and I haven't seen it in so long, and I haven't never watched it with this filmmaker brain, so to speak. So I'm excited about it. Awesome. Well, just final thoughts before we wrap up here. Daniel, what did you think about Alien?
Like I said, I think it's iconic. I think it's very clear when you watch it how much thought and intention and just cool stuff at a filmmaking level is going on, at a writing level, at a directing level, at an acting level. I think it's great. The atmosphere, I mean, it really did like pioneer an atmosphere that I feel like is still being used today and still being homaged to today. There's so many episodes of Rick and Morty and episodes of Star Trek and all these other things that we would never have if we have never had aliens. And I think it's very clear when you watch it just how important it is to that. I'll still stand behind. I think as a horror movie, I don't find it very scary, but I think that's more of a fault of it. Just it's an older movie, and so the effects aren't just very realistic looking, and so maybe that's even part of it. I think that's even part of it where like the alien was more scary when I didn't see it, because when it would come on the screen I'm like, those teeth are so shiny and metal looking. You know what I mean? Or like it just turns its head so stilted. Anyway, I like it. I love it. It's a great movie. I totally get why it is heralded the way it is.
Bruce?
Yeah, we should you mentioned the design of the movie earlier, so of course we should mention H.R. Geiger, who, designed all this alien stuff, and I think that, so much of, you know, just like Daniel was saying, is I mean, not only do we get this incredibly strong female character that set the template for shows to come. I mean, everything, for instance, about the world of the Borg in Star Trek, obviously just grows right out of Alien. I mean, it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
so influenced. So I mean, just the influence of this movie, the impact that has had on probably science fiction. I mean, science fiction horror confluence, of course, maybe a little more overall science fiction than horror, but certainly both of those realms, and especially when they come together, is such a huge influence. And the quality of the movies that come afterwards, especially, we'll talk about Aliens next week, but it's hard not to disagree with Donovan that, it leads to one of the greatest sequels ever made. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a movie that still stands up, and I know a lot of my younger students, they don't necessarily list it on their top 10 list, but I can think of plenty of students who've told me that how much they love Alien even now. People keep rediscovering it and loving it. Yeah, it may not be as scary. I think a lot of things. I think horror movies in general, of course, as we get older, just don't feel scary anymore anyway, in the same way that they did when we were kids and teenagers. I mean, I remember watching Alien, at night at sleepovers with friends, and it felt scary. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think I was scared, but it had that quality. That's a complicated question, but yeah, what a fantastic movie. And it's simple, it's relatively
Yeah.
simple, it's relatively straightforward. And I will just say our criticisms about Act Four is kind of funny because it's when the movie becomes a little less simple. It's when characters have to go get some fangamalajang, in order to
Turn
do the
something off, turn something
fangamalajang.
on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And then, but for most of the movie, it's been so straightforward, and that's part of what's so brilliant. It does
Yeah.
strip everything down and just relies on the basics, and they all, from a plot perspective and a narrative perspective, and they all work so well. that Act 4 just suffers a little bit in comparison to the rest of it, but it's still a great payoff and fantastic movie.
Yeah, I like I said earlier, I love it, and all these films and the Predator films, all those have been very influential on me, just in my taste and just films and everything in general. And I feel very honored to be able to talk to you both about it, and especially honored as we go into our episode 200 starting next week. We're just recording next week, and we'll talk about Aliens by one of my favorite directors of all time, James Cameron. And I get to finally talk about what I think makes the perfect sequel of how James Cameron nailed the questions to ask to how to make a perfect sequel. And I think he did that with Aliens and Terminator 2. And I'm very excited to kind of break that down for just in general and for our listeners.
I'm excited too. I think I should have known it because it was Ridley Scott, but Alien felt way more like an art film than I expected it to. Like
Yeah, yeah,
than like I mean, of course, it's Ridley Scott. What was I expecting?
yeah.
But I think because Aliens and the subsequent movies that have felt, at least seemed to me, more actiony, like have kind of, maybe that's what I've expected more from the series. So I'm excited to dig into James Cameron's version of things. I'm expecting it to be a much faster ride, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this, Daniel. I think how from the famous rumor of how he pitched the movie is he went into like in there. There's like
Oh,
a whiteboard,
yeah.
Alien, and then he wrote S with like dollar signs, and it's like, it's
It
like,
has
oh,
nothing
you're
to do with the
brilliant.
art side of it, but that's a brilliant way. That's a brilliant,
Oh,
confident way to make
yeah,
money, at least in the
yeah.
1970s or 80s.
Oh yeah, yeah.
In
This is
Hollywood.
well, it's a few years later. I think it's like 85 or something, and so it's a little chunk later. I have to
Well,
look at it,
back
but
when
we'll
Hollywood
discuss.
didn't
87 maybe.
automatically make a
87.
Yeah,
sequel as soon as something like made
yeah,
positive gain.
yeah. We'll talk about that too, and I'm very excited to talk about it next week. Anyway, guys, Bruce, how can our listeners find all the cool things that you do?
They can find me at thehutchfiles.com, where I post a lot of my analyses, although I've been a little slow on that lately. And they can also find me on Instagram at BDHutch.
Perfect. And Daniel, how can our listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know what you thought or think or have thought of Alien. Not Alien. Yes, I mean, I'm sure, I know Christopher Pistol often checks in on our episodes, especially when Bruce joins us. So let me know, Chris Pistol, what do you think of Alien at bit.ly/241mail. Don't text me. Don't put down your phone no, pick up your phone and type in bit.ly/241mail and let me know there. Thanks.
Perfect. And if you can't hit us up at our bit.ly, you can always find us in the comment section below, youtube.com/241 studios. I do too. I can't keep up with everything, guys. I'm sorry. But again, I'm excited for next week, episode 200. It's been 5 years in the making, 4 years in the making. I don't even know anymore.
2018? No.
I don't know.
2019?
I don't know. I don't
Early
know.
early 2019, right?
Yeah. Well, no,
Maybe, yeah.
it was in the
Or did
fall.
you guys actually
We
start
started
in
with The
2018?
Mandalorian. When The
Yeah.
Mandalorian started, that was our first episode, like the week after that
Yeah.
first episode. So
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Well, I
our
can't
first
think of it.
episode as a group was early 2019.
Yeah,
The
but
first time I
was,
joined you
it was the World
the
War One movie,
Oscar
right?
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Oscars. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
that's right.
1917.
Yeah, we did
1917.
both. That's right. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
we sure did. We sure did. Anyway, next week, 200 episodes. I'm excited. There's no two other men I'd rather do it with. And my name is Donovan Thompson,
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
I'm Bruce Hutchinson.
and we have spoken.